I would like to refer to a metaphor in order for us to better understand what is the meaning of Belgian colonialism in Congo. The metaphor that I think is the metaphor of the flux or the pipeline. So I do not intend to be exhaustive because we will also have the time to have questions and we will answer them. But I shall not be superficial either. So I call this movement, as I was telling you, the flux of terror or the pipeline of terror. A system that transformed from physical violence to bureaucracy, from ideology to memory, and continues to shape the present. So it's important for us to think that colonialism still endures in its consequences in Congo, in Burundi, in Rwanda. So I'm going to divide this presentation in 4 parts. In the first one, I'm going to describe a little bit the violence, the brutality of the Belgian colonialism in Congo. In the second one, I'm going to describe a little bit the institutional control, how it was managed to do that in Congo. Also, I'm going to address the cultural reproduction. And in the end, I'm going to reflect a little bit. I know that we'll have other panels, but I would like to reflect on the legacy and post-colonial continuity. So, in the first part, it's important to address the colonial violence, the violent foundation of the colonialism in Congo. So the foundation of the entire system was direct physical violence under King Leopold II between 1885 and 1980. So Leopold ruled the Congo as his personal property, establishing a regime built on forced labor, mutilations, and terror. Congolese workers were coerced into extracting rubber and ivory under impossible quotas. Those who failed, it's important to remember that they faced, as it was shown in the video, they faced amputation, they faced execution, they faced burning of their villages, among other several kinds of violence that we could mention here. Soldiers of the Force Publique, the public force, were even ordered to present severed hands as proof of used ammunition. A grotesque system that turned violence into administration. And I would like to stress that this was not random violence. This was a deliberate mechanism of governance. Violence became a political language, the instrument through which economic extraction and racial hierarchy were enforced. So this starts to change with international protests. For example, led by activists such as Edmund Morrow and Roger Casement. As a result, in 1908, Belgium annexed the territory as a former colony because, as I was saying, it was a private property of King Leopold II. But the annexation did not end the terror, it simply reorganized it. So moving forward to my second topic, I would like to address that the visible brutality of Leopold's regime gave way to bureaucratic control and moral paternalism, but the violence still continued. So the colonial administration introduced systems like the 10-year plan for economic and social development, which claimed to modernize the Congo. But in practice, this plan consolidated Belgian authority and excluded Congolese people from decision-making. Education and religion became powerful instruments of control. Missionary schools aim not to empower, but to discipline. Children were taught obedience, manual labor, and moral purity, never critical thinking. The church framed colonization as a divine mission, while colonial science portrayed Africans as inferior, justifying domination through knowledge. This was an empire built as much in the classroom as in the field. Resistance, however, began to emerge from these structures. Movements such as Kimbangism offered a spiritual rejection of colonial order and were met with fierce repression. Thus, during this phase, terror changed its register from the whip to the whip and the sermon, from mutilation to moral control. And then we pass to the third topic that I would like to address, which is the social and cultural background. So in the first stage, the flow of terror entered culture, representation, and everyday life. So colonial ideology extended in popular culture through comics, education, and public monuments. So it's important to remember that, because even today, children in Belgium, they read these comics. For example, Tintin au Congo, Tintin in Congo, or Spirou, portrayed Africans as naive, childlike, or savage, while depicting Belgium as brave civilizers. Can you understand the impact of that in children reading these kind of comics? These cultural products transform oppression into humor, turning hierarchy into normality. At the same time, colonial cities were built to reflect racial divisions. While quarters separated from black quarters, curfews imposed and surveillance are constant. Even children born of mixed descent were labeled children of sin by Catholic priests. We must not forget that. And this cultural and spatial segregation produced what I call a moral geography of domination, where every space, symbol, and narrative reinforced the superiority of the colonizer. But this phase also gave rise to subtle forms of resistance. I think it's important that we always stress that there was always resistance, and there still is. So Congolese artists and musicians began to transform colonial languages and rhythms into new expressions of identity. The later removal of colonial statues, as it was shown in the video as well, like that of King Albert I in Kinshasa in 2005, symbolized an ongoing effort to reclaim memory and rewrite space. In Belgium, however, the colonial myth endured. Status of Leopold II still stood proudly. They still are there. And school curricula continue to present the Congo as a land civilized by European generosity. Silence itself became a tool of power. So we go to the fourth and final point that I would like to address, which is the legacy and post-colonial continuity. So this phase extends beyond colonialism. It's important to remember that. It is the persistence of terror through memory, denial, and institutional silence. So after independence in 1960, Belgium's influence did not end. The secession of Katanga province, supported by Belgian troops and companies, protected corporate interests and undermined Congolese sovereignty. When Patrice Lumumba, we always have to remember that he was assassinated. The first prime minister sought to challenge Belgian control. He was overthrown and assassinated with Belgian complicity. This is proof. This was neocolonialism disguised as intervention, continuing the same logic of control through economic and political means. So many decades later, Belgium began to face its past publicly. In 2002, it apologized for its role in Lumumba's assassination. In 2019, it apologized for the abduction of mixed-race children. And in 2020, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established to examine the colonial legacy, but only after the recommendation issued by the report of the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent of the United Nations. Yet, the Commission's work was limited. It had a short time frame. It excluded victims from decision-making and avoided addressing reparations or social inequality. The 2020 Commission that was established in Belgium. In this way, it reproduced epistemic violence, producing knowledge about colonialism without redistributing power. Meanwhile, Belgian society remains deeply divided. Some citizens still view colonialism as a civilizing mission. Others demand material and symbolic reparations. Research shows that when Belgians confront the reality of exploitation, they are far more likely to support reparations, revealing that memory itself is political. Thus, in the present, the flux of terror persists, now through the politics of forgetting. So, going to my conclusions, across these transformations, the flux of terror shows how colonial power never disappeared. It simply changed its form. From Leopold's cut of hands to missionary classrooms, from economic domination to silencing memory, violence adapted. It became bureaucracy, morality, and forgetting. Today, that legacy still lives in institutions, in school books, in museums, and in everyday inequality. The brutality may have ended, but its structure remains. Belgium's apologies and the 2020 Truth and Reconciliation Commission were important moments, but they were also limited. The Commission excluded Congolese voices, avoided reparations, and focused more on producing reports than restoring justice. So, to interrupt this flux, apology is not enough. Real healing requires participations and reparations. Reparations, reparations. Reparations must be built with Congolese communities and not for them, as a shared process of recognition and repair. Participatory measures must be taken. The Belgian government must issue a formal apology for colonialism and a promise of non-repetition. It has not done so far. Congolese families must be compensated, streets must be renamed, and Leopold statues must be removed from public spaces. Belgian schools must teach children the truth about colonialism, and both countries must create shared spaces of remembrance and dialogue. So these are not symbolic gestures, they are structural changes, and they are needed. They transform memory into accountability and recognition into justice. Only when Belgians and Congolese work together as equal partners in truth-telling and repair can we begin to close the distance between history and justice. Reparation is not the end of this story. It is the beginning of a new one where memory becomes action and where the flux of terror finally breaks. Thank you.